Florida is a cultural crossroads where people of different backgrounds have mingled, traded, and sometimes fought. In this episode of Colocales, we'll compare the oldest city in the United States to one of the most iconic and oldest 3D adventure games of all time. Sunny, beautiful Florida. The beaches, the palm trees, the fauna can be awe-inspiring. And while it can sometimes be the butt of all state jokes, its cities have beautiful locations and are full of rich, deep history. None more than St. Augustine. While I was experiencing the sights, the sounds, and the atmosphere of the oldest city in the United States, there is a video game that matches this ancient city perfectly. The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. What can be said that hasn't been said about this game before? It defined a generation and it blazed a path for many future games. Not only did it have incredible graphics, music, game mechanics, and level design for its time, but it continues to be arguably one of the best games in the Legend of Zelda series. A series that spans over 3 decades and over 20 games that have mostly been received incredibly positive by critics and fans alike. But you might ask yourself, what does a 450-year-old American city have in common with a Japanese video game made in the late 90s? They're more so alike than you might think. They both share themes of legend, adventure, treasure, heroic quests, and the powerful seeking more power. But in order to get into that, we have to start at the beginning. Every story has an origin. The story of Florida is no different. Even though the oldest city in America has a nice ring to it, that isn't really accurate. Technically speaking, St. Augustine is the oldest continuously occupied settlement of European origin in the contiguous United States. So, what does that mean exactly? Well, there were European settlements that were established before St. Augustine, but did not last for many reasons. Also, there were Native Americans that lived before the Europeans got here, mainly the timucuas. The timucua were a Native American people who lived in nowadays Florida and Georgia. They were the largest indigenous group in that area and consisted of about 35 chiefdoms, many leading thousands of people. When the Spanish conquistadors met them, they stood in awe of the timucua physique. The powerful Indian men seemed like giants, standing at least 3 or 4 inches taller than most of the Spanish. At the time of European contact, the timucuas had an estimated population of 200,000, but with the introduction of new infectious diseases from the Europeans, which they had no immunity to, the people suffered severely, and by 1595, their population was estimated to have been reduced from 200,000 to 50,000, and 13 chiefdoms remained. By the year 1700, a combination of sickness, warfare, and slave trading completed the Timucua's unfortunate extinction. But why was this the case? What were Europeans doing in the western part of the world, and how did they get there? Spanish-European colonization of the Americas started in the late 15th century. Cristobal Colon, otherwise known as Christopher Columbus, came to the Spanish queen and king to ask them to fund his journey west to the New World. After years of rejection, Queen Isabel and King Ferdinand finally agreed, but they didn't do it out of kindness. The Americas were of interest. Spain wanted to find an easier western route to Asia for trading purposes. They also wanted to extend their empire's reach while at the same time spread the message of Christianity. I guess you could say they were after their own Triforce, one of gold, glory, and God. But instead of landing in Asia as they were planning to, they landed in the Caribbean. It was in Asia, but it didn't stop the Spanish from slowly conquering as much as they could. In their thirst for power, they would eventually conquer most of the Caribbean, Central America, and even some of South America. And they also set their sights to the land of the north, that would eventually be called Florida. Written records show that in 1513, the first Europeans reached Florida. These were Spanish conquistadors, invaders, soldiers, and adventurers of the Spanish Empire, and leading them was the Spanish explorer and adventurer Juan Ponce de Leon. He called the area La Florida in honor of Pascua Florida, or Feast of the Flowers, Spain's Eastern time celebration. Now, you may have heard the tales of De Leon's search for the fabled Fountain of Youth. It alone has inspired art, books, movies, and even video games. The thought of a source of water that can heal your wounds and give you life is something we can definitely compare to in Ocarina of Time. The city has fountains all over and even has a museum park dedicated to the Fountain of Youth. Though the legend is far-fetched, it's still an interesting and alluring story, but not exactly a unique one. Tales of sacred, restorative waters existed well before the birth of Spanish conquistador Juan Ponce de Leon around the late 15th century. Alexander the Great, for example, was said to have come across a healing river of paradise in the 4th century BC, and similar legends cropped up all around the world. So, how did De Leon hear about this, and why was he searching for it? I was surprised to learn that this is actually all just a myth. Well, at least partially. There is no historical evidence of Juan Ponce de Leon searching for the hidden magical spring, but when the Spanish were conquering the Caribbean, they heard rumors of a magical fountain and river north of Cuba. Surely it got to Ponce de Leon's ear, and that's why he went to Florida, right? Not exactly. There's no written record of Ponce de Leon mentioning the fountain in any of his travels. As he led the conquistadors to Florida, his motivation was to find more islands to expand the Spanish Empire. The claims were actually fabricated up by critics of Ponce de Leon to make him look bad and try to give him a bad reputation, saying that he was trying to find the spring to cure himself of impotence while he had already fathered several children. Ironic that the claims made to try to kill his name actually made Ponce de Leon infamous. As popular as Juan Ponce de Leon would wind up being, he was not the only Spanish conquistador of fame related to Florida. But that's all the time that I have in this video. It will continue in part 2. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider leaving a like and sharing. And until next time, later.